The work and commitment of the United Nations in Papua New Guinea is quite significant with the country's development agenda as we move forward to realize Vision 2050. The ideal objective would be for Papua New Guinea to be among the top 50 countries with good Human Development Index. We are now at a transition point from the Millennium Development Goals to the new Sustainable Development Goals. Where the United Nations plays its part here, I talked to the resident coordinator, Roy Trivedy. Thank you, Mr. Trivedy, for coming on to PNG tonight.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you.
Okay, I'm glad. You are the head of the, well, let me put it this way. Mr. Roy Trivedy he represents the Secretary General of the United Nations in Papua New Guinea. So in a way, sir, you are an ambassador. Although you don't use that title.
I don't use the title.
Okay. But the United Nations has done a lot in this country with ideas, with ways to go forward. And you've been here 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. We'll get down to the nitty-gritty bit a little later on in the program, but give us a general picture of how you've seen Papua New Guinea go forward with our development strategies in the 2.5 years that you've been here.
Papua New Guinea is making actually quite remarkable progress in the last few years. Okay, we all know that we would like the country to achieve even more, to achieve its full potential. We know that there is room for us to do even better. But if we think about whether it's life expectancy in this country, it has improved over the last 2 decades.
50 something to we're now in the 60s and 70s.
60 plus, 67,
yes.
Which is really great. But of course, the thing that matters to people is the quality of life issues. And if you're in Port Moresby, it's one set of issues that confront you. But if you happen to be in a very remote area, you also have different challenges. And part of our job is to make sure, working with government and with other partners, to really improve everybody's well-being and quality of life and so on. Yeah. And we're doing okay. We also want to do better, though.
Absolutely.
We also know that.
Absolutely. Gender issues, law and order, women empowerment, education, health, a broad range of issues. Where are we now with this?
Yeah. Actually, John, part of my post covers 5 main headings. Okay, the first is development. Help the country to develop as quickly in line with its own policies and what government in those countries want, what government and the people want. The second thing is around humanitarian work.
Right.
And we know that we are still recovering from the El Nino, for example, currently. There are still many people in our country right now still facing quite severe food shortages, probably for the
aftermath is still there.
Yes. And, there are regular earthquakes and floods and so on and so forth. A third area is around human rights, because a lot of the UN's work globally is based on human rights principles. And our government in Papua New Guinea is a signatory to most of those human rights instruments and so on. And so we are constantly working with government to say, how can we continue to improve human rights? And they cover a broad range. And then the final 2 things that I'm also responsible for is first looking at security of all UN staff and so on within the country. And that, as we know, we have some quite difficult, challenging security environments in Papua New Guinea.
Given world trends and world situations.
Absolutely. And then the final thing is around, we know that in all of these countries, nothing happens unless you have the political connections and making sure the politicians are really engaged with, these issues of development of the country and so on. And part of my job is to reach out also to the political side to make sure that they fully understand the UN's work and how we can assist the country.
Okay. Some of those are captured in what we would call the Millennium Development Goals. How we failed with that generally, I think. That is the general belief right now. What have we done? What have we not done? Or what have we done with Millennium Development Goals, and how do we go forward from here?
Yeah. Look, with the Millennium Development Goals, when global leaders agreed those goals just before the year 2000, everybody knew that it was unlikely that every country would reach every goal.
And we are one of them.
And we are one of the countries that didn't reach any of the goals. We're one of the few countries, but that doesn't mean that we haven't made progress. And the aim was always that even when the MDGs finished in 2015, there would need to be a further phase of work. And that's why we now have the Sustainable Development Goals, which continue the work of the MDGs and actually take us further.
Well, the MDG, the report, I think it was launched in the United States. Our Foreign Affairs Minister was there. And if I may show the viewers, here it is. It was launched in the United States but Papua New Guinea knows little about it, its content, its cover even. Why didn't we know about this?
Well, this was the report that our government produced and presented at the UN General Assembly last September. And I think this report will be made available this time, I think this Parliament, to all parliamentarians and launched in country with the Ministry of Planning leading the report. Okay. And so I think the aim is, definitely not to keep it separate, that we want people to know about it.
That's right.
And
why we failed, and we can go forward with the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, Sustainable Development Goals. And on the back of the Millennium Development Goals, where do you see we need to concentrate in SDG?
So with the SDGs, we have last September agreed, global leaders have agreed, these 17 goals. And it's worth saying, John, that these goals are slightly different from the MDGs. They build on the work, and of course they take us further. So for example, there were 8 Millennium Development Goals. The first was dealing with poverty, and there's a set of those 8,
Sure.
okay? Now what happened when the Millennium Development Goals were formed was that those were formed by a group of experts going and working out what does the world need to do to improve. This time round, before the Sustainable Development Goals, there was in fact a lot of consultation in every region of the planet. And so the Sustainable Development Goals actually have more backing from people, including in the Pacific and including in Papua New Guinea, where we also did a consultation exercise.
Okay.
These 17 goals cover a range of different things which can really improve the planet. And the aim is to bring together people, planet, so environmental issues for the first time, issues of prosperity and growth and sustainability, the issues around peace for the first time, because we know one of the things that stops development in most contexts is conflict. Yeah. And finally, the way to achieve all of this is through partnerships. So these 5 Ps, as we call them, are really important and are the basis for the new Sustainable Development Goals.
We can feel a sense of optimism that at least the Sustainable Development Goals will work, and that the Millennium Development Goals didn't work, or at least it did, but it didn't work as well in the first 4 years, as we understand it, and nothing had been done at that time. But we are in a better position with the SDG now.
We are in a better position. Let me just say, on the MDGs, of course, globally, the MDGs were achieved because the aim was to reduce by half the number of people living in absolute poverty. And partly because of the rise of China and other countries, those global goals were achieved. But in Papua New Guinea, we didn't make as much progress on some of these things. And so this time around, we want to make sure that we start early. We don't spend the first 4 years trying to understand what the goals are. We get that message across to all of our people and then really start implementing them.
But I think this government is also is determined to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals work, particularly with the Minister responsible, Charles Abel, and National Planning. All this then we end up with the Vision 2050. The magical answer that would be that our Human Development Index is good and that we are among the top 50 countries in the world. Will we ever arrive at that given time period, given the kind of developments we've had so far?
Well, we want to be in the top 50 of the Human Development Index worldwide by 2050. But of course, it's very challenging because at the moment we are 150 plus.
Okay. Way down.
So we have to work extremely hard. But the country has incredible prospects. If you look at what we can do in terms of our growth and so on, in terms of improving human development, which is health indicators, education, well-being, training our people. If we can do some of those things, then of course we could. But it will be challenging, definitely.
The government seems to have its pillar policies, if you like, priorities in those areas now. So at least, and putting a lot of resources into it as well. So that is good news.
Yeah, I think having the right policies is vital. And we have, for example, through the Department of Planning, the new STARS policy, Sustainable Development, Responsible Development policy. But the key is, having the policy is one thing, but applying it and implementing it, that is the challenge. And I think that's the challenge that all of us really need to grasp.
People and I think information, statistics, data, something you're concerned about. I think you raised it even at the Leaders Summit.
That's right. Having good data on what are the improvements we need to make, making sure we're collecting data continuously so that we can not only say between now and 2030, have a clear idea of are we reaching our targets, and then really making sure we're constantly monitoring to make adjustments if needed and so on. And the key worldwide is governments alone cannot do this. You have to have people, you have to have businesses, everybody contributing to a national movement, a national effort to achieve these goals. And of course, 17 is too many. We also know that. So we need to prioritize quite quickly which are the goals that are most relevant for Papua New Guinea.
At least achieve half of that. And I think, or 3/4 of that, we're getting somewhere. We are running out of time. Roy Trivedy, thank you very much for coming.
John, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Roy Trivedy, head of the United Nations Development Programme and resident coordinator. After 15 years with the lapse of the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, there are at least 4 reference projects of the MDG acceleration. They are Simbalai in Milne Bay, Musendai in East Sepik Province, Domil in Jawaka, and Trogel in the Western Highlands Province. This is PNG Tonight. After the break, the Divine Word University in Madang.